What if the answers you've been searching for were hidden in a simple story? For centuries, Zen monks have passed down powerful stories, not just to entertain, but to awaken something deep within us. Stories that can shift your perspective, calm your mind, and lead you to unexpected wisdom. In this special collection, we bring you some of the most thought-provoking Zen stories shared on this channel. Each tale holds a lesson, a moment of clarity waiting to be discovered. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's begin. How to overcome fear and self-doubt. It was a quiet evening, and the sky was painted with hues of deep orange and soft purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh earth, and the only sound that filled the air was the soft chirping of crickets. The wandering monk sat by a small flickering lantern outside a modest temple, his gaze calm and steady as he observed the world around him. As the last traces of daylight faded, a young man approached. His shoulders were slumped, his expression troubled. It was clear he carried the weight of something heavy within him. "Master," the young man said hesitantly, "I am afraid. Afraid of failing, of making mistakes, of not being good enough. No matter how hard I try to silence it, doubt whispers in my mind. It follows me everywhere, keeping me from moving forward." The monk studied him for a moment. Then, without a word, he lifted the lantern beside him. The warm glow cast a small circle of light around them. Then he stood up. "Walk with me," the monk said. The young man hesitated, but eventually fell into step beside him. Together, they walked along a narrow path that led into the forest. The lantern's light illuminated only a few steps ahead, while the rest of the path was swallowed by the darkness of the night. They walked in silence for a while until the young man finally spoke. "I can't see what's ahead," he said, his voice uncertain. "I don't know what lies beyond the light." The monk nodded. "And yet, you are still walking." The young man furrowed his brow. "Because the light shows me just enough of the path to take another step," the monk smiled. "Exactly." The young man looked down, watching how the light moved with them. No matter how dark the path seemed, each step revealed just a little more of the way forward. "Fear and doubt arise when we try to see too far ahead," the monk continued. "We want to know every turn, every obstacle, every outcome before we even take the first step. But life does not offer such certainty." They came to a small stream, its waters glimmering in the lantern's glow. The monk bent down, picked up a smooth stone, and tossed it into the water. Ripples spread outward, vanishing into the darkness. "You see," the monk said, "doubt is like standing at the edge of a river, worrying about how deep it is, wondering if you will slip or if you will make it across. But courage," the monk paused, dipping his foot into the water, "is stepping in, trusting that each step will guide you forward." The young man watched the ripples deep in thought. "How do I stop the fear?" he finally asked. The monk turned to him. "You do not stop it," he said. "Fear will always whisper. Doubt will always try to pull you back. But you must not let them decide for you. They are only voices, not chains." The young man took a deep breath, letting the monk's words settle within him. He had been waiting for the fear to disappear, waiting for a time when he would feel fully ready, fully certain. But now he realized that moment might never come. "Do not seek the absence of fear," the monk said gently. "Seek the courage to move despite it." The young man looked at the path ahead. It was still dark. The unknown still stretched before him. But now it no longer felt so terrifying. He didn't need to see the entire journey, only the next step. And so, with quiet determination, he took a step forward. The lantern's light followed. So, dear listeners, what step have you been afraid to take?
The art of letting go. One day the monk met a merchant weighed down by 2 heavy sacks. The merchant stopped to catch his breath. "What's in your sacks?" the monk asked. "Treasures I've gathered over the years," the merchant said proudly. "But they're getting harder to carry." The monk nodded thoughtfully. "Why not put them down for a while?" he suggested. The merchant hesitated, but finally set the sacks on the ground. His shoulders relaxed, and a deep sigh escaped his lips. "That feels better," the merchant admitted. The monk smiled gently. "Our minds are like those sacks. We carry worries, regrets, and desires until they weigh us down. But what happens when we let them go?" The merchant stood straighter, lighter. "I suppose I'd walk more freely." "Exactly," the monk said. "Letting go does not mean losing what matters. It means freeing yourself to move forward with peace." So, dear listener, what are you carrying that you no longer need? Set it down, walk lighter, and discover peace.
From chaos to calm, a Zen tale that will transform your day. One day, the wandering monk walked along a dusty path that led to a village bustling with noise and activity. Merchants shouted their prices, children laughed and ran about, and carts rattled over uneven stones. In the midst of this vibrant chaos, the monk spotted a young man sitting by the roadside, his head buried in his hands. The monk approached gently. "You seem troubled, my friend," he said. The young man looked up, his face weary and lined with frustration. "Master, my life is a storm. My work demands too much. My family needs my attention, and my mind is filled with endless worries. I can't seem to find peace no matter where I turn." The monk nodded thoughtfully. "Come with me," he said. They walked together until they reached the edge of a quiet forest. There, the monk led the young man to a small clearing where a stream meandered gently through smooth stones. "Sit with me," the monk invited. The young man, though skeptical, obeyed. The only sounds were the soft babble of the stream and the rustling leaves. After a few moments of silence, the monk spoke. "Would you like to hear a story?" The young man nodded. The monk began. Once there was a sculptor who lived in a village at the foot of a great mountain. He was known far and wide for creating statues so lifelike that people swore they could breathe. One day, a nobleman commissioned the sculptor to carve the most magnificent statue he had ever made, a figure of peace. The sculptor agreed and began his work with great enthusiasm. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, yet the sculptor grew increasingly frustrated. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't capture the essence of peace. He smashed several attempts in anger. One afternoon, he went for a walk by a tranquil lake to clear his mind. As he sat by the water, he noticed ripples spreading out from a falling leaf, eventually settling back into perfect stillness. In that moment, he understood. He returned to his workshop, and instead of forcing perfection, he allowed the stone to guide his hands. The final statue was simple yet profound, a figure seated in quiet contemplation with a serene expression that radiated calm. When the nobleman saw it, he was moved to tears. "How did you capture peace so beautifully?" he asked. The sculptor smiled. "I stopped trying to create peace and instead became peaceful myself. The stone simply reflected it." The monk paused, letting the story settle. "You see," he continued, "peace is not something we force into existence. It arises when we let go of our need to control everything and simply be present, like the sculptor by the lake." The young man frowned. "But how do I let go when everything demands my attention?" The monk smiled gently. "Just as this stream flows over rocks without resistance, so must we learn to let life flow without clinging or pushing. Sit here for a while, listen to the water, breathe deeply. You will see, peace is not found by controlling life, but by being present within it." They sat in silence, the young man's breath slowing, his shoulders relaxing. After some time, the monk stood. "Remember," he said softly, "chaos may swirl around you, but peace is always within reach. It begins with a single breath. The young man bowed deeply. "Thank you, Master. I think I understand now." The monk nodded. "Go forth, not seeking to escape the storm, but learning to stand calm within it." So, dear listener, what storms are swirling in your life today? Take a moment, breathe. Let the chaos pass by like clouds in the sky. Remember, peace is not a distant dream. It's already within you, waiting to be embraced.
The power of small steps. One day, the wandering monk met a young seeker sitting by a quiet stream. The seeker looked troubled, his brow furrowed with frustration. "Master," the seeker said, "I have been practicing Zen for months, yet I feel no closer to peace or enlightenment. I meditate, study, and follow every teaching, but it feels pointless. Nothing is changing." The monk smiled softly and gestured toward the trees nearby. "Do you see that bamboo over there?" the monk asked. The seeker nodded. "When bamboo is planted, nothing appears above the soil for years," the monk explained. "But beneath the surface, its roots are growing wide and deep. Then when the time is right, it suddenly bursts forth and grows faster than any other plant." The seeker's eyes widened in realization. "So even when nothing is visible, growth is happening?" "Yes," the monk said. "Each day that you meditate, practice mindfulness, or show compassion, even if it feels meaningless, those are roots growing deep within you." Zen is not about sudden enlightenment. It is about tending to the present moment, step by step, breath by breath. Trust the small steps. They are never wasted. The seeker smiled gently, his burden lifted. The monk nodded. "Walk your path without haste, without doubt. Like the bamboo, you will grow strong and unshakable when the time is right. Even a single breath is a step." So, dear listener, take it well.
Anger is poison, a monk's powerful warning. One day, the wandering monk encountered a fisherman by the banks of a wide, tranquil river. The fisherman sat on the shore, his net tangled and torn. He muttered angrily under his breath, pulling at the stubborn knots. "Having trouble?" the monk asked, his voice calm as the flowing water. The fisherman scowled. "Trouble? More like disaster. I've been at this river since dawn, and all I've caught are weeds and misery." To make matters worse, a rival fisherman, that greedy fool, set his nets upstream and scared off all the fish. He yanked at the net, only making the tangle worse. "I'll never forgive him." The monk watched in silence for a moment, then knelt beside the fisherman. "May I help?" the monk offered. The fisherman hesitated, then grudgingly nodded. The monk gently took the net and began untangling the knots with patient hands. "Your net is like your mind," the monk said. "When anger knots it up, it becomes useless." The fisherman frowned. "But I have every right to be angry. That man cost me my catch." "Perhaps he did," the monk acknowledged. "But tell me, who suffers more from your anger? The river doesn't care, and your rival isn't burdened by it. Yet here you sit, tangled and miserable." The fisherman's hands stilled. "So what should I do? Just let him get away with it?" Holding on to anger is like carrying hot embers in your hands, hoping to throw them at someone else. The longer you hold them, the more you burn yourself. Let them fall, and you'll feel the relief of cool, open palms. The fisherman sighed deeply. "But it's not easy." The monk smiled gently. "No, but peace is found in patience, not struggle. Begin by loosening one knot at a time, just as we are doing now." Together they freed the last of the tangled net. The fisherman held it up, whole and ready for use once more. "Thank you," the fisherman said quietly. "I suppose my nets and my thoughts have been tangled long enough." "Then cast them wisely," the monk advised, "and the river will reward you." As the monk walked away, the fisherman stood by the river, lighter in spirit, ready to fish with clarity and peace. So, dear listener, what knots of anger tangle your mind? Loosen them one by one. Let go and discover the calm waters of peace. The healing power of silence. One day, the wandering monk sat beneath an ancient tree, immersed in the gentle whisper of the wind. A troubled seeker approached. "Master," the seeker said, "my mind is a storm, thoughts swirling endlessly. How do I find peace?" The monk gestured to the vast, quiet sky. When the wind rests, the lake becomes still, and only then does it reflect the sky clearly. The seeker frowned. "But how do I quiet my thoughts?" The monk closed his eyes. Silence is not the absence of noise, but the space where truth reveals itself. Sit in stillness, not to stop the noise, but to hear what lies beyond it. In that moment, the seeker understood. Silence wasn't emptiness, it was clarity, healing, and truth. In a world filled with noise, silence becomes your greatest teacher. Embrace the stillness, heal your heart. Kindness. One day, as the wandering monk traveled along a winding road, he came upon a weary merchant struggling to push his heavy cart up a steep hill. The wooden wheels groaned under the weight of tightly packed sacks of grain. The merchant gritted his teeth, his face red with effort, sweat dripping from his brow. "Move, you wretched thing," the merchant muttered, shoving the cart with all his might. But the wheels barely budged. The monk stopped and watched for a moment before speaking. "Would you like some help?" he asked, his voice as calm as the wind rustling through the trees. The merchant scoffed. "Help? What good would that do? This cart is too heavy and I have miles to go. No one will push it for me." The monk smiled. "Then let us push it together, even if only for a while." Before the merchant could refuse, the monk stepped forward and placed his hands on the cart. He pushed gently, and with the combined effort, the wheels began to turn. Slowly, step by step, the cart inched forward. The climb was long, and the sun beat down on their backs, but the monk remained steady, his breath calm, his strength unwavering. The merchant, at first too proud to speak, stole glances at the monk. This stranger who had no reason to help, yet did so without hesitation. At last, they reached the top of the hill. The merchant let out a deep breath, resting his hands on his knees. "I didn't think we'd make it." The monk wiped the dust from his robe. "It is easier when the weight is shared." The merchant looked at the cart, then at the monk. "You had no reason to stop, no reward to gain. Why help me?" The monk gestured to the road ahead. "A journey is not measured by the distance we travel, but by the kindness we leave behind." The merchant was silent for a moment, then let out a small chuckle. "I have spent my days guarding my goods, fearing thieves and cheats. I have always thought that the world is harsh, and so I must be harsher. But now I wonder, perhaps I have been carrying more than just grain." The monk nodded. "A burden carried in the heart is often heavier than the one carried on the back." The merchant straightened, his burden no lighter, yet somehow easier to bear. The monk smiled, gave a small bow, and continued on his journey, his footprints soon fading into the dust. As the merchant watched him disappear down the road, he found himself smiling, a rare, genuine smile. So, dear listener, whose burden can you help lighten today? Even the smallest kindness can lift a great weight. How to embrace change without fear. One day, the wandering monk was traveling through a quiet village nestled at the edge of a vast forest. The seasons were shifting. Golden leaves drifted down from the trees, carpeting the path in hues of amber and rust. As he walked, the monk noticed a farmer standing by his field, staring at the changing landscape with a furrowed brow. The monk approached with a gentle nod. "Good day," he said. "The colors of change are beautiful, are they not?" The farmer sighed heavily. "Beautiful, perhaps, but they also bring uncertainty. The harvest is done, and now I must wait through the long, harsh winter. I've always feared this time of year." The monk gazed at the golden horizon. Change, like the seasons, is inevitable, he said. Yet fear need not accompany it. The farmer frowned. How can I not fear it? What if the winter is harsher than before? What if I run out of provisions? What if spring never comes? The monk smiled gently. Come, walk with me, he invited. Together, they walked to the edge of the field where a towering oak tree stood, its branches nearly bare. This tree, the monk said, has weathered countless winters. Each year it sheds its leaves, standing exposed to the biting winds. Yet it does not resist the change. It knows that spring will return, and with it, new growth. The farmer touched the rough bark of the tree. But I am not as strong as this tree, he admitted. Strength does not come from resisting change, the monk said, but from embracing it with grace. Just as the tree lets go of its leaves, we must learn to let go of what was, trusting that new opportunities will bloom when the time is right. The farmer's brow softened. But how can I trust what I cannot see? Consider the seed buried beneath the soil, the monk said. It cannot see the sun, yet it grows toward it with unwavering faith. Change is like that, an unseen path that leads to growth if we have the courage to walk it. The farmer took a deep breath, the weight on his shoulders lifting slightly. Perhaps I've been too focused on what I fear, instead of what might blossom from this change. The monk nodded. Fear blinds us to possibilities, but when we let go of fear, we make room for wisdom and growth. As they stood by the ancient oak, a cool breeze swept through the fields, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. Thank you, the farmer said quietly. I will try to greet this winter with an open heart. The monk smiled. Change, like the seasons, is but a chapter in life's story. Embrace it, and you will find peace. So, dear listener, what changes are you facing? Are you clinging to the past out of fear? Like the oak tree, trust that new leaves will grow. Let go, walk forward, and discover the beauty that change brings. The story of the empty cup, humility and learning. One morning, as a soft mist clung to the mountains, the wandering monk found himself at a humble tea house nestled along a winding path. The scent of freshly brewed tea drifted through the air. Inside, a scholar with sharp eyes and an air of pride was deep in conversation with the tea master. The scholar, renowned for his knowledge of philosophy and literature, had come seeking wisdom from the tea master. Teach me what you know, he demanded confidently. I have read every book and mastered countless teachings, but I seek even greater enlightenment. The tea master, a gentle and serene man, nodded politely and gestured for the scholar to sit. The wandering monk observed quietly from a corner, sipping his own cup of tea. The tea master prepared a fresh pot and began pouring tea into the scholar's cup. The golden liquid streamed steadily until the cup was full, but the tea master did not stop. The tea overflowed, spilling onto the table and dripping onto the floor. Startled, the scholar exclaimed, "What are you doing? The cup is already full." The tea master smiled gently. Exactly, you are like this cup, so full of your own knowledge and opinions that there is no room for anything new. How can I teach you if your cup is already full? The scholar fell silent, his arrogance melting into humility. He bowed his head. I understand now. I must first empty my cup. The wandering monk, having witnessed the exchange, spoke softly. Wisdom flows to those who make space for it. Just as a full cup can hold no more tea, a mind cluttered with pride and certainty cannot learn or grow. He paused, letting the words settle like leaves in still water. True learning begins with humility, the willingness to admit that we do not know everything. When we empty our cup, we open ourselves to endless possibilities. The scholar bowed deeply to both the tea master and the wandering monk. I will remember this lesson. As the wandering monk continued his journey down the misty path, he reflected on the encounter. In life, it is easy to fill our minds with assumptions and ego, thinking we have all the answers. But true wisdom lies in remaining open, curious, and humble. So, dear listener, ask yourself, is your cup full? Or will you empty it, making room for new wisdom and growth? The River and the Rock. Lessons on Resilience. One day, the wandering monk sat by a river, watching the water flow effortlessly around a massive rock. A curious student asked, "Why doesn't the river fight the rock?" The monk smiled and said, "The river knows its power. It doesn't resist, it simply flows." Over time, even the hardest rock will be shaped by its gentle persistence. Be like the river, the monk continued. Stay patient, stay resilient. Challenges may block your path, but with calm persistence, you'll find your way around or through. The importance of gratitude. One day, the wandering monk sat beneath a great tree, sharing tea with a weary farmer. The farmer's face was lined with frustration as he spoke of his troubles. "The drought has dried my fields," the farmer lamented. "The harvest is weak. There's nothing left to be grateful for." The monk listened quietly, a gentle smile playing on his lips. He picked up his cup of tea and held it in his hand. "Tell me," the monk asked softly, "has the drought stolen the warmth of this tea from your hands?" The farmer paused, looking down at his cup. The steam curled gently upward, carrying the rich, comforting scent of the brew. "No," the farmer admitted, "the tea is warm." The monk's voice was calm yet firm. Gratitude begins by noticing the small things, the warmth of tea, the shade of a tree, the simple joy of sharing a moment with another. The farmer's expression softened. He took a slow sip of his tea, letting the warmth settle within him. The monk continued, "Gratitude doesn't need perfect circumstances. It only needs presence." And so the farmer learned that even amidst hardship, there are always blessings to be found, if only we pause to notice them. What simple joy can you appreciate right now? Detachment, the key to inner freedom. One foggy morning, the wandering monk crossed an ancient stone bridge. Beneath him, the river surged, carrying broken branches and fallen leaves downstream. A fisherman sat nearby, tugging furiously at his tangled net. Frustration etched deep into his brow. The monk paused. "Why do you struggle so?" "I do," the fisherman snapped. "This net was my livelihood. Now it's ruined and I've caught nothing." The monk watched the river silently. "Do you see how the water lets go of everything? Branches, leaves, even the mud stirred up by the storm." The fisherman nodded, confused. "That's why it flows so freely," the monk continued. "It clings to nothing, yet nothing stops it." The fisherman whispered, "But if I let go, what will I have left?" The monk smiled gently. "Yourself, and the strength to cast a new net." The fog lifted, and for the first time that day, the fisherman's heart felt light. The monk walked on, his voice lingering like the fading mist. "Let go, and you will flow." Knowing your true path, a young man stood at a crossroads, paralyzed by uncertainty. The wandering monk approached and asked, "Why do you hesitate?" "I don't know which path is right," the man confessed. "What if I choose wrong?" The monk picked up a leaf and let it fall. The wind carried it gently down one path. "Did the leaf struggle to choose?" the monk asked. The man shook his head. "The wind knows where to take it, just as your heart knows where to go," the monk said. "The problem is not the path, it is your fear of walking it." The man took a deep breath, stepped forward, and the road no longer felt uncertain. Trust your journey. The path becomes clear when you walk it. The power of not reacting. One day, the wandering monk was sweeping the temple courtyard when a frustrated young man approached. "Master," he said, "people constantly provoke me. How do I stop getting angry?" The monk paused, then picked up a cup from a nearby table and offered it. "Take this," he said. The young man reached out, but the monk suddenly pulled it away. Then he offered it again, only to withdraw it once more. After a few attempts, the young man sighed. "Why do you keep pulling it away?" The monk smiled. "Why do you keep reaching for it?" Confused, the young man paused. The monk continued, "You cannot control others, but you can control yourself. When someone insults you, their words are like this cup. If you don't reach for them, if you don't react, then they have no power over you." The young man's frustration faded as he understood. The monk resumed sweeping. "A still mind is stronger than any storm. Learn to let go, and peace will follow." If this lesson resonated with you, like the video and subscribe for more Zen wisdom.